Hi everyone, welcome to Understand the Bible. My name is Phil Saker. Today I'm going to do something slightly different to what I normally do on Understand the Bible. Normally these are videos teaching the Christian faith, but today I wanted to look at things from a slightly different angle. I want to actually address this video to church leaders, people in church leadership, and I hope that it will still be interesting for anyone who's kind of tuning in and watching, that this will still be informative. But I particularly want to ask church leaders a question, which is, have we as a church succumbed to the bigotry of low expectations when we do evangelism, when we do discipleship? I think it's worth asking the question and comparing the way that we do evangelism and discipleship with the way that Jesus did it. And I think it's always worth comparing everything we do with the way that Jesus did it to make sure that we're on the right path, on the right course. So let's firstly think about a normal way to do evangelism and to do discipleship. I've been in churches for my whole life, and I think I have a reasonably good grasp on the way that we in the UK do things. I don't know, I think things in America are done a bit differently sometimes, but in the UK, I think it's fairly normal that you would have sort of low commitment groups for or services, things for people to come along to who are just kind of exploring. So you might have a toddler group, for example, which is for the community, but you might have some Bible stories and songs as a little bit of Christian input as part of that. You might have a sort of messy church style service for people who are coming in and just again want to bring the family, want to bring children along and teaching them Bible stories and things. And then you maybe have other services which are kind of aimed at people who are new, who are exploring faith. And that seems to be a common way of doing things. And then, of course, you've got your courses. The hope is that people will come on a course such as Christianity Explored or Alpha or one of the many other courses that are available, and they'll come and find out about what it means to be a Christian. The idea is, I think, that something in the low commitment course will inspire someone to think, oh, I want to find out more, and then they'll want to come on the course, and then they'll want to become a regular church member and want to join a home group and all of that sort of thing. It seems to me that that's the working assumption of the way that much of the UK church does evangelism and discipleship. They'll come to a low commitment group, then they'll come on a course, then they'll come to church and they'll become church members. And some people have come, and I've seen people sort of come to church, come to a course, become part of the church. I have to say that hasn't worked quite so well with younger people. It's mostly been older folks who've done that, people who've had a kind of Christian background, because a lot of people, particularly younger people, have got no background in the Christian faith whatsoever, and that's a challenge, I think, which I'll come on to in a moment. So what I wanted to do was compare our approach, the approach which I've just kind of outlined, with the approach which Jesus takes in this passage from Luke chapter 14. So let's compare our approach with Jesus's. This is Luke chapter 14, verses 24 to 35. Large crowds were travelling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, 'This person began to build and wasn't able to finish.' Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure heap. It is thrown out. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." Okay, this is a passage where Jesus is outlining what it means to be a disciple. So what I'm going to do is just going to quickly run through this passage, and then at the end we'll think about some of the lessons that we can learn from this. So the first thing that I wanted to point out was that large crowds were travelling with Jesus. So it seems that the people just kind of picked up on Jesus, on who he was, that he drew people to him. Maybe it was the miracles that he did, or maybe it was the teaching. But either way, people were just kind of drawn to Jesus. And I think it's still the same today, that there is still this fascination about Jesus, even if people are not interested enough to do much about it. I think there is still this kind of fascination with the figure of who Jesus is. And, I just wondered if the people who Jesus is drawing to him are kind of like those people on the fringes of church, the people who are coming to those low commitment groups, who maybe are, thinking a little bit about Jesus, but, not enough to actually come regularly or commit to doing a course or something like that. So, this is what Jesus is addressing. Who Jesus is addressing is the people on the fringes, not his core group of disciples. And that's quite clear from what it says. It says, large crowds travelling with Jesus and turning to them, he said. So this is Jesus just addressing the people who are along for the ride, not the core 12, the committed disciples. This is to all and sundry who just were along for the ride with him. So what does Jesus say to them? Well, he doesn't sugarcoat it, does he? This is what he says. And it may seem pretty harsh. He says, if anyone comes to me, does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. So Jesus lays it out straight for them. He says, if you want to follow me, that's great. If you want to follow me, but anyone who wants to follow me, you have to love me more than you even love your family. And in those days, today loving your family is important, but in those days it would have been a much more major thing than it is today, to leave your family and to prioritize Jesus above even your blood relatives would have been a massive thing in those days. And that's what Jesus is saying. The first thing he says is that I have to come number one. If you want to follow me, I have to be number one thing, even above your closest family, even above your closest friends, above anything else that you love in your life. I have to be number one. That's what Jesus says to them straight off the bat. The second thing that he says is that you need to take up your cross and follow me. And of course, in those days, taking up the cross, that was people would have, if they hadn't witnessed a crucifixion, I think they would have heard about it. They would have seen those condemned to die, because that was the whole purpose. The Roman executions, it was public because they wanted to terrify the population into not breaking the law. Saying this is what happens to people who defy us, who break the law. It was a public thing. So when Jesus says taking up your cross, people would have understood what he meant. It was following him out to die. So Jesus says, if you want to follow me, you can't even love your own life more than me. It might mean losing your life in a physical sense. That's what Jesus is saying. So he really doesn't sugarcoat it for the fringes, if you like. And then he goes on to give two illustrations about what this actually looks like to help us understand. The first illustration he gives is that of building a tower. So he says, if you're building a tower, won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it. So he says, imagine someone who's built big building project. You don't start a big building project if you don't have enough money to complete it. I think there are a lot of sort of companies and the like around in the country at the moment who could learn a lesson from that. I remember not far from where I live, in Ipswich, there was a building which came to be known as the wine rack by locals, which is because it was an apartment block which was just unfinished for years and years, and it looked like a wine rack because it just had the scaffolding up, and it became a bit of a laughing stock. And that's what Jesus said would happen. If you start something which you can't finish, then you'll be a laughing stock. And what he means here is that, before you start, you need to know what it costs to finish, so that when you start, you're going in eyes open. So he says, when it comes to following me, to following Jesus, then, we need to know what the cost is, so that you don't start following Jesus only to find halfway down the line that it actually costs more than you think. That we need to be upfront with the cost. The second illustration that he gives is about a king and an approaching enemy. So he says, suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. He sits down and considers whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000. Otherwise, he'll look for terms of peace. So Jesus says that if you think you can't, if this king thought that he couldn't win, then the best thing to do would be to look for terms of peace. But he would first think about whether it was something that he could win. And Jesus goes on to say, in the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. And I wonder actually here whether Jesus is making a reference to the coming judgment, and whether Jesus is saying, actually, there is a cost to following me, but there is a cost to not following me as well. And that, if we're like the king who, thinks that we can't win, to consider the cost of not winning and to make appropriate action. So if we look at the coming judgment and we say, well, there's no possible way I could stand in the coming judgment, we need to actually come to God, and we need to seek his forgiveness first. I think that may be what's going on there. In other words, that the message of Jesus comes with a warning as well about what happens if we reject that message. And then Jesus says at the end, he says, whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. So Jesus says, this is a message which is just for anyone. Anyone who wants to hear, let them hear. It's just a message which is going out, and I'm going to broadcast it far and wide. And if you're listening, you can hear me. And is similar to what he says elsewhere. Think about what Jesus said. In John's Gospel. All those that my Father gives me will come to me, and that my sheep hear my voice. Just the message needs to go out, and then the ones whom God is calling will hear and will come. So that's a brief tour through this passage. What can we learn about this, and particularly thinking about the way that we do evangelism and discipleship? I think there are a few lessons for us. I think the first thing is an encouragement, which is that if we are doing things right, if we're presenting Jesus, if Jesus is there present among us when we meet, when we're out and about, that then people will be drawn to the church, to us as Christians. And that's because Jesus is attractive. That people do come to Jesus because he offers something real, something which this world cannot offer, because it's fake. That Jesus can offer true life. John 10 verse 10, I came to bring life to the full. And that's what Jesus still offers today. And so if we are preaching the message of Jesus, if we're living the message of Jesus, then people will come. And I think that's something which we ought to be more encouraged about, actually. Just to know that the message of Jesus is attractive. It's still attractive. It will always be attractive. Because, Jesus is the centerpiece of the universe. He is where true life is to be found. That's the first thing. The second thing, though, is that we need to be clear and confident in calling people to give up everything for Jesus. I wonder, in our evangelism and in our discipleship, when people hear that message that Jesus gave, verses 26 and 27. If anyone comes to me, does not hate father, mother, wife and children, and so on. Anyone who does not take up their cross is not worthy of me, as Jesus says. When do people hear that message in our evangelism and discipleship? To be honest with you, if I thought about someone coming into church for the first time and hearing that message, I think I would cringe. I think, oh gosh, don't say that. That will put them off. They might not want to come back. But maybe Jesus at that point is saying, yeah, well, you may be right there. And perhaps that's the point, isn't it? That actually if we make the bar for coming to Jesus so low that you barely have to step over it, then I don't think that's actually going to bring crowds to Jesus. And this is the thing, that people are drawn to challenge. People are not drawn to something if they think it's easy. I think people are drawn to something if they think it's hard. There was a video by Jordan Peterson a few weeks ago, which is called "A Message to the Christian Churches." And I thought that it was a striking video, particularly coming from Jordan Peterson, who is not a Christian, as far as I know, although he's certainly moved towards being a Christian, I think, in recent years. But something that he said really struck me, and let me just play a quick clip of what he said.
Tell those who have never been in a church exactly what to do, how to dress, when to show up, who to contact, and most importantly, what they can do. Ask more, not less, of those you are inviting. Ask more of them than anyone ever has.
So what he says there is make it the hardest thing that they've ever heard, they've ever done. That's what Jesus does. And I think that should be the focus of our evangelism and the focus of our discipleship, which is not, hey, have you heard about this person called Jesus? And, just giving it to them in little bits and pieces, but saying, if you're attracted to this message of Jesus, then you need to submit your life and give everything in order to follow him. It seems to me that is the way that Jesus did it. And I think this is particularly important for children and for young people to hear. I think young people are growing up in a world which has got so little certainty and so little guidance that they are just desperate, hungry for this kind of message. They want something which they can give their lives for. I was struck by this actually over the last, the course of the summer holidays. It's just coming to the end now of the summer holidays as I am recording this. Over the last few weeks, I've met a number of young people who I haven't met before. I was chatting to one in church on Sunday morning. She's recently come into the church, and she's come to the youth group and then decided to come to church with her grandma, which is lovely. But I was chatting to her. She was 14, and she's clearly a very she's an intelligent girl. She's bright. She's inquisitive, and she as I was chatting to her, I just thought, she would love to know all of these kind of things. She needs to know about what it means to give her life for Jesus, and everything that it means to obey God, and to the duties that God requires of us, the way that God wants us to live, and so on. She's ready. She's prime for that. When is she being taught that? Or one of the other the young people that I met, similar, bright, inquisitive, intelligent, when are they being taught these things? I think so often with young people especially, we succumb to the bigotry of low expectations, which is we think, they need something at low level, to have some very basic teaching, without actually going into the deeper truths about who God is, teaching them about, how amazing, how big God is, how he's unchangeable, how he's eternal, how he is omniscient, he's all knowing and all powerful, all those things, and teaching them about how we are justified by faith and how we are sanctified by the Holy Spirit, and all of those things. I think that's all part of it. They need to know, and they're not too young to know. It's really struck me as over the last year I've been doing a group once a week with people. I've been actually doing some of the Understand the Bible videos with them. We've gone through the Apostles' Creed, we've gone through the Ten Commandments, and we've gone through the Lord's Prayer in the last year. And the one comment which has come over time and again is, I've never thought about it like this before. There's one woman in the group. She's now in her early 30s, I think, but she's been in the church since she was about 15. And I remember her saying, we did the session on the Creed looking at God the Father and what it means for God to be our Father in heaven. And she said, I've never thought about God this way before. And she'd been in the church since she was a teenager. You'd never thought about God before in that way. And this is what I'm trying to say, that, when are we actually teaching people from all ages, not just children and young people, but when are we teaching them these deep truths of the Christian faith? And that's the final thing that I wanted to talk about, the final point from this, which is, it's not a sin to think strategically. No, it's not a sin to kind of think, well, when are people who don't know anything about the Christian faith going to come and learn those things? When are they actually going to be taught this? When are they going to hear that message? When are they going to be taught it? So rather than just, having these things, leaving these things to kind of to chance or to, whenever, we actually think, well, no, I want that to happen then. I want them to be confronted with that message about Jesus early on, and basing our groups and our evangelism and our discipleship on that, and on prioritizing teaching people what it means to follow Jesus, and working things out in our churches, working things out in our groups, so that there are always opportunities to actually have that teaching, to actually be able to say come along to this group, you will learn. And there was an interesting interview actually with Alistair Roberts on Speak Life a few weeks ago, where he was talking about our Sunday services and how perhaps that could be done more on a Sunday morning. So rather than having just a sermon, having a sermon as well as a shorter sermon, as well as having some time teaching, maybe using a catechism, or I have to plug Understand the Bible at this point, maybe using some of the Understand the Bible material, as over the last few months I've gone through, like I said, the Ten Commandments, the Lord's Prayer, the Apostles' Creed, all of which kind of form the nucleus of traditional catechesis. So basically what I'm trying to say here is, that I think we don't want to succumb to the bigotry of low expectations. No, we want to treat people with the dignity of having to make that choice for Christ. And we want to present that clearly and frequently, saying if you want to follow Jesus, you need to give your all to follow him. And we need that to be front and centre I think in everything really, in church, as well as in our home groups, as well as in our, even I think in our low commitment groups, because people need to be able to hear the message that if they're wanting to follow Jesus, they need to make that commitment. It's not enough just to come along to a monthly service or a toddler group and say that you're a Christian. You need to actually make a commitment. And so how, as a church, do we go about doing that? Anyway, I've given some suggestions here, and I hope that those are helpful for you. Do join in the conversation below. Do let me know in the comments. And if you appreciated this video, then don't forget, I'd love it if you could just kind of like, subscribe, and that would really help me out as well. So thanks so much everyone for joining me. Let's be thinking and praying about the way forward, and I hope to see you again soon for the next one. God bless.